In 2016, superhero cinema stood at a crossroads. For nearly a decade, comic book blockbusters had relied on a familiar formula. Heroes assemble, a sky beam opens up, and the world is saved with relative unity. But what happens when the people saving the world can no longer agree on who they answer to? Captain America Civil War wasn't just another chapter in a sprawling franchise. It was a calculated, emotionally devastating deconstruction of the modern superhero, and looking back, it remains one of the finest balancing acts Hollywood has ever pulled off. At its core, the film succeeds because its conflict isn't manufactured by a mustache twirling villain, it's driven by ideology. We can call this the burden of liberty. Think about the setup. The collateral damage of Lagos in New York isn't swept under the rug anymore. The world demands oversight through the Sokovia Accords. This introduces a fascinating philosophical fracture. On one side, you have Tony Stark, a man crushed by the weight of his own inventions, believing that global security requires rules, international law, and institutional accountability. On the other, you have Steve Rogers, a man who watched institutions corrupt from the inside out during World War II, arguing that individual autonomy and moral conscience must always supersede bureaucratic control. Neither man is purely wrong, and neither is entirely right. The moral gray area is precisely why the ideological divide resonated so deeply with audiences, turning a comic book slugfest into a legitimate debate over liberty versus security, yet handling a massive philosophical debate while juggling a dozen costume characters is a monumental screenwriting trap. Most franchises would buckle under the weight, but what the Russo brothers achieved here was nothing short of the masterclass of crowd control. Think of the sheer logistics. Directors Anthony and Joe Russo had to introduce two massive game changing characters, Black Panther and Spider Man, while servicing an entire ensemble cast. Yet every single hero in the airport sequence has a distinct motivation, a narrative purpose, and a clear tactical style. Spider Man's wide eyed awe contrasts sharply with Black Panther's cold, singular vengeance. Ant Man brings tactical chaos, while Vision wrestles with his own bargaining humanity. The action isn't just mindless noise, it's visual storytelling. Every punch thrown and shield deflected tells you exactly where these characters stand emotionally. Beneath the spectacle, however, lies a deeply personal tragedy. To understand why the film hit so hard, you have to look at the tragedy of Tony Stark. In Age of Ultron, Tony's worst nightmare isn't losing, it's failing to protect the people he loves because he wasn't prepared enough. His support for the Sokovia Accords isn't a sudden, out of character heel turn, it is the direct, logical manifestation of his deep seated trauma, guilt, and PTSD. Robert Downey Jr. plays Tony not as an arrogant billionaire in this film, but as a man running on fumes and moral exhaustion. When the final shoe drops and he discovers the truth about his parents' deaths, his reaction isn't calculated political posturing. It is a raw, unfiltered, heartbreaking betrayal. The armor falls away, leaving behind a broken man lashing out in pure grief. And standing opposite that grief is an unwavering dedication to the past. Because for Steve Rogers, the conflict is more than a soldier. For Steve, Bucky Barnes isn't just an international fugitive or a compromised asset. He is the last remaining anchor to a life that was stolen from him. When the world tells Steve to compromise his morals for the greater good, his refusal to abandon Bucky becomes his ultimate rejection of institutional corruption. Steve's shield isn't just a weapon, it's a symbol for his personal code. By the time he drops that shield at the end of the film, he is making a definitive statement. He cannot serve a system that asks him to compromise his humanity. It's a quiet, devastatingly stubborn act of heroism that redefines what it means to be a captain without a country. Looking back at 2016, it's incredible to see just how much Civil War shifted the trajectory of the Marvel Cinematic Universe and modern blockbusters as a whole. At a time when franchise fatigue was beginning to loom, this movie proved that superhero cinema could be mature, morally ambiguous, and unafraid of permanent consequences. It didn't end up with a neat bow. It ended with fractured friendships, a divided team, and a world left dangerously vulnerable. 10 years later, Captain America Civil War remains the gold standard, not because of the heroes who threw punches, but because of the deep, human scars they left behind.